Hello, welcome to CivilNet. My guest from the United States is Vartan Matiossian. He is a historian, the author of a number of books and publications. Dr. Matiossian, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
You are here in Armenia participating in a number of conferences. But I want to talk to you about Medz Yeghern, which translated into English, I think, is great crime.
That's correct. That's my opinion too.
And for our viewers who haven't heard of the term Medz Yeghern, it is often used synonymously with genocide. But there's a whole controversy with Medz Yeghern. Can you please tell us where it comes from and what does it mean today?
The word Yeghern itself comes from the 5th century. It was first used in the Armenian Bible and also in a few sources in the 5th century. And at that time, it meant, generally speaking, evil or offense, in the sense of crime. Although the Haigazian dictionary, which is the main source for classical Armenian, gives a certain number of definitions, but because I have studied very closely each and every use of Yeghern in the 5th century, I came out to the conclusion that even those definitions by the Haigazian dictionary, I would say that at least they are confusing. So, in the 5th century, the word Yeghern had these two meanings, and when we come to modern times, we find out that starting in the late 18th century, dictionaries and then authors use Medz Yeghern alternatively as evil and more increasingly as crime. And by the beginning of the 20th century and up to 1915, it's clearly used as crime. I can tell you such names as Siamanto, Taniel Varujan, Rupen Zartarian, using the word with the meaning of crime, which means that by 1915 it was established as such. And it was used as such again in the aftermath of the Armenian Genocide in the old period 1915-1922 and later until 1965. But there is a certain kind of confusion with the use of the term. I am not going to explain that now because we don't have time. That has led to a certain use of the word as meaning tragedy or calamity. But that use actually is not backed by dictionaries, especially it's not backed even by Armenian English dictionaries. And people started to use, particularly Armenian Americans, started to use gladly and happily Medz Yeghern translating as great calamity without even checking a dictionary.
Okay, I want to back up if we may. Up until the term genocide was coined by Raphael Lemkin, Armenians, the survivors of the genocide who dispersed primarily to the Middle East, when they spoke about those events during the First World War, they referred to it as Medz Yeghern.
They used several terms. They used names that common names like chart and axor, referring to a particular part of the event, because chart is massacre, so it's one part of the event, and axor is the exile, so it's the other part of the event. But those terms were not used as proper nouns. They were used as common nouns. The proper nouns that were used, there were several of them, like Medz Yeghern, Medz Vojir, Aret, and others. But of those terms, the most frequently used, particularly in the press, the literature, etc., was Medz Yeghern, and in an overwhelming way, I would say, from 1915. I have references to Medz Yeghern starting 1915 already, up to the early 90s. It's by the early 90s when Haigagan Tsiraspanutun, as a proper noun, starts to be used.
Not before then?
It is used from 75 indeed. You have to remember the justice commands of the Armenian Genocide, which was translated as հայկական ցեղասպանություն. But by the early 90s is when հայկական ցեղասպանություն starts to be used more frequently than Medz Yeghern.
Okay,
but it doesn't mean that the other one disappeared.
Right, right. I mean, there's a reason why we're having this conversation. There's a political reason why we're having this conversation about two words, Medz Yeghern, the great crime. I think it's fair, or let me tell the story and you tell me if I'm going in the right direction. Up until the 50th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, I think that was a sort of turning point in our awakening consciousness, identity, the politicization perhaps of what had taken place during the Medz Yeghern, during the genocide, even though we weren't necessarily using those words. And then as Armenian Genocide took over from Medz Yeghern, there was this issue with the international recognition of the Armenian Genocide. And when world leaders who were trying to avoid using the G word, as they say, instead used Medz Yeghern, what they were doing, in fact, was using the word genocide, but in the Armenian context.
Yes, but there is a difference between Medz Yeghern, which is the following, and the genocide, which is the following. Medz Yeghern is the proper noun of the event, and genocide is the legal term. And we are using the legal term to replace the proper noun. Because when you say Armenian Genocide and you capitalize it, you are turning it into a proper noun. So, and at the same time, you are erasing the other term, which with its memory included, and in the end, you come to the point that you reject that the term ever existed, or you say why? Because there is a lack. That is the great calamity. The great calamity that there is a failure or a wrong way in the transmission of knowledge that comes to the point that the word that has been used for 90 years, because people don't read Armenian, as a matter of fact, or they don't open dictionaries, so they tend to forget that the word ever existed. So the problem with the use of Medz Yeghern, which actually started to be used, as you most probably remember, in 2001. You have the Pope using Medz Yeghern, but using Medz Yeghern in a context of a prayer, which we frequently tend to forget. He's talking about Medz Yeghern at the monument of the Medz Yeghern, because Dizanagapert is Medz Yeghern Hushartzan, it's not հայկական ցեղասպանության հուշարձանը. The official name is Medz Yeghern Hushartzan. It's the museum which is called հայկական ցեղասպանության Tankanan Institute. So, and he's talking in the context of a prayer, and when you read the prayer and you imagine the place where he's saying this prayer, Medz Yeghern fits perfectly. But before and after that, John Paul II signed two declarations where the word genocide was used, two declarations together with Catholicos Karakin II. So it's not that John Paul II ever used Medz Yeghern not to recognize the genocide or something like that. That's absolutely out of context. After that, we have George Bush using not Medz Yeghern, but its Armenian, its English translation, quote unquote. One time in small lettering, and the other one in capital letters. But few people recognize that in 2005 he had used actually Medz Yeghern, but in English. Then you have, and this is frequently forgotten, Stephen Harper, Prime Minister of Canada, using Medz Yeghern in his recognition of the genocide in 2006. But when Stephen Harper recognized the genocide, apparently nobody in the Armenian American community read that declaration.
Which said Medz Yeghern.
Which said Medz Yeghern in the same text where he quoted the two Canadian chambers using the word genocide. Because he used the words in the proper sense of the proper noun. That's what he said. He didn't need to do that. Actually, he didn't need to use Medz Yeghern because he could have said, you know, the day of the massacres, because in the end he used genocide anyways. But nobody noticed that, and when in 2011 he used again the same Medz Yeghern, again nobody said anything. But when Obama uses for the first time Medz Yeghern in 2009, everybody got incensed because of that, and you had like a crusade about the issue, and of course mistranslations included, and all sorts of different opinions, views that were grounded in nothing, if you ask me, to the point that nobody, in my humble opinion, stood up and said, you know, Mr. President, thank you. You have just recognized the Armenian genocide because you have used the proper name of what it is, the genocide, and it's the proper name that for the past 30 years has been used as a synonym of the Armenian genocide. I can give you one single example. The president of Armenia, Serge Sarkisian, at least 3 times in 3 of his messages on April 24, has used interchangeably հեղինակային ցեղասպանություն and Medz Yeghern in the same text, and the same text, the English translation, which is an official translation on his website, is also used Medz Yeghern and Armenian genocide interchangeably. So when the president of Armenia uses that, who are you to tell that that's not an equivalence?
Okay, your statement begs the question, why?
Why?
Why whoever it was that started the campaign, or for whoever it was not good enough, why didn't we take that and said, as you just said, thank you, Mr. President, you just recognized the Armenian genocide, and instead we turned it on its head and we said, you didn't recognize. Why would we have done that?
I believe that the first reason comes from an ignorance of the history of the term, and the refusal to try to learn about the issue. The second reason is that because there are so many different interpretations, even among Armenian studies scholars, about the translation, there were many different versions of that over the past 20 or 30 years, and I'm only talking about those that were uttered in English. I'm not going to give you a list or names of every single people, but I have collected a fair number of them. And the third issue is because we don't want to understand that if it doesn't mean that if you don't use ցեղասպանություն, the word Yeghern doesn't work, because Yeghern actually, and you can check newspapers and dictionaries, as I will repeat, for the past quarter of a century, it has been adopted as genocide. If you open maybe 6 or 8 dictionaries, Armenian English and English dictionaries, mostly but not all of them produced in Armenia, you will find Yeghern, genocide, ցեղասպանություն, genocide, or genocide Yeghern, ցեղասպանություն. So if the dictionary says so for the past 10 years, again, it begs the question, why you go against what has become common knowledge? Who says that Yeghern means genocide? I say it as someone who speaks Armenian, or anybody who speaks Armenian is entitled to say it. No one who doesn't know Armenian has the right to tell me what my words mean. It's a matter, it's a famous paragraph of, Humpty Dumpty and talking to Alice about who is the master of the words. I am the master of my own words. I mean, I as an Armenian am the master of my own words. It's not, if the Turks make an apology campaign and say that Medz Yeghern means buyuk felaket, great calamity, it doesn't mean that I'm going to say, oh, you are right, it means that, because the Turks say so. And I'm playing, again, I am playing the game they want. And on the other side, and we did that. We did that. So, again, it's a matter of lack of knowledge.
This is such an interesting and fascinating conversation for me, truly. I mean, based on what you have told me, we can now comfortably say that the President of the United States, Barack Obama, has technically recognized the Armenian genocide by virtue of the fact that he used terms in Armenian that means genocide for us.
The most ironical thing is that we could say so, but the Turks beat us to the point because they said so in 2009. I will give you only one example. Shukru Elektar, former ambassador of Turkey in the US in the 80s, one of the pioneers of Turkish denial in the States, he wrote an open letter to Obama saying in April 2010, telling him that he had used the Armenian word for genocide in his 2009 statement. We are talking about someone who denies to this day, he's 90 years old, but continues to deny the Armenian genocide. I'm giving only one example of several I have collected from Turkish sources. So again, I'm baffled at some point for this kind of reaction, but of course I try to understand myself why this happened this way, and again, it's a matter of not being able to take advantage of a political opportunity or thinking outside the box at some point.
Well, on that note, about thinking outside the box and taking advantage when you have it right there in black and white. Thank you very much, Dr. Matiossian, for this really, really interesting interview and something I think that many of us will ponder about and think about for a long time to come. So thank you very much.
Thank you for this, again, for this invitation and for the interesting conversation.
And I'd like to remind our viewers that my guest was Dr. Vartan Matiossian, a historian and author of a number of books. Stay with CivilNet.